You're tuned to KSQM 91.5 SQM.
And right now it is 1 minute past 9, and Gardening with Ciscoe is made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery.
It's Gardening with Ciscoe. Dust off your trowels and connect your garden hoses. It's time for an hour of cultivated fun. Let's join Sassy Susan as she welcomes Ciscoe Morris.
Good morning, Ciscoe.
Hey, hi, Daphne.
How are you today?
Oh, I am just doing great. It's a little foggy, but I'm hoping for some sunshine before this day is over.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the weather station here, and it's 41 degrees here in Squim, but it's not foggy, so I don't know what the day is going to hold. I'll know when I walk out at 12 noon, but then I'll be given the weather forecast at 1:45. But the sun hasn't come out yet. But yeah, it is pretty wild with the wind that we had last week. I was walking on, I guess it was yesterday morning with Thor, and I was complimenting a woman, and I said, you're doing some yard work, and she looked up at me and she said, I love gardening with Ciscoe. Now, mind you, I've never met this woman before. She lives in a nearby neighborhood, but you have such a following, and I guess my voice is kind of distinctive also, because she knew right away. She said, "You're Sassy Susan, right?"
Oh, cool.
Yes, I am. So she asked for a song request, so that is going to be your sending song today.
Oh, boy.
When we are done with sharing all of that knowledge that you're going to share. So I am so excited. We've got a sponsor for this show. Isn't that awesome?
That is awesome. I've been in that nursery before because I bought some garden art there. These 3 pigs sitting on top of each other. It's the coolest garden art I've got in my garden.
Yeah, they have. I'm pleased. I think that it's a great thing for them to sponsor your show. I think that that's wonderful. But one of your intro topic is so appropriate for the storm that we had come through on Tuesday night. I mean, Don and I did not hear it. I don't know what planet we were on, but we did not hear anything. And everyone is going, you're kidding. So what is your intro topic today?
Well, it's storm damage, and I got an email and have had telephone calls with a really close friend of mine from up in that area, Michelle, and she just put in this beautiful new garden under a red cedar, and another huge tree came down and took every branch right off one side of the red cedar, and it was terrible. And I had to tell her she's going to have to she's probably going to want a certified arborist to come out. I was a certified arborist for years. And the first thing you look at whenever you come to see a tree that's been damaged or isn't doing real well, you look at what the target is, as we call it, which means how close is it to the house?
Yeah.
If it falls, could it hurt someone? And they had the tree that came down and cleaned off the whole side of the tree, landed on the garage. So, oh my gosh! And her new garden under the red cedars, it's under like 12 feet of branches. It's like, oh my gosh. So, if your tree got damaged pretty bad, especially if a lot of branches came off one side, that can attract bark beetles, especially if it's on like the south or west side of the tree, because, all that bark that never seen sun is suddenly exposed to direct sun when spring comes. It can sunburn real easy because it's never gotten, used to the sun. slowly like normally happens. And so then you get bark beetles get in there. And if that happens, you're going to lose your tree. And this one's pretty close to the house, so I really recommend for anybody, if you've got a tree that could do damage and it's been damaged, you might want to have a certified arborist come out, and that's isa.com. You could, and there's a link at Ciscoe.com, but you could, you can have someone come out and really make sure the tree's safe, and then you're going to want to keep a close eye. And, of course, it could any big branches, widowmakers that are up there just sitting in the tree. That can happen. But, that way then you kind of keep an eye on the tree and see, is new growth looking healthy at the end of the branches? Does it look, is there sap coming down? That would be a sign that there's some kind of boring insect in there. A lot of these beetles that bore into trees, they're flying around in nature. Trees, when they're in bad shape, they send out chemical signals that basically tell the beetle, I've had it, come do me in, turn me back into the earth. So
to make sure that I've got it right, if they want to contact a certified arborist, they go to isa.com. That's where that's the website. Okay.
Or no, Barry's telling me no, that's not the right address.
Oh.
So she's sitting here next to me, so she'll let me know.
Okay. So
all right, it's pnwisa.org.
PNW. That stands for Pacific Northwest, right?
Yep. isa.org.
Okay, pnwisa.org. Okay, yeah, because you don't want to get an arborist that's in Connecticut or Texas or something. That doesn't help you much.
Yep, and you don't want to just, if you just got on the computer and did arborist, you could get into trouble. You at least want to put certified arborist in there if you did a search, because you want somebody, you go to a ton of training and take a whole bunch of tests to become a certified arborist, and you want someone who knows what they're doing when they're dealing with your big, wonderful trees, And, one thing is sometimes it's not a bad thing if a tree dies if it's off in the woods or something, because those, we call them snags, and they become homes for all kinds of wildlife, and woodpeckers make their home in there, and then, all kinds of squirrels will live up there, and birds, so it's not always a bad thing as long as they're off where they're not going to cause any damage, but you sure want to, and they might be able to save your tree where you might lose it, because my friend, she loves her tree, and she knows it's a home for all kinds of birds and wildlife. So, I'm hoping they can save it for her. It's going to be tight, but they might, someone will climb up there and give her an opinion of what's going on, and, they've got a lot of experience. So hopefully she'll be able to save that tree.
Hopefully. No, go on.
I was just going to mention also, I remember years ago a friend of mine, they in Kent, they had this really heavy ice storm, and it knocked some of his trees. It kind of knocked them over, but they didn't fall all the way. They were on an angle. And we got a bunch of strong people and pushed them back up straight, and then tied ropes to things to hold the tree straight for about a year. Some of them we had to almost dig them out of the ground to straighten them out, but some we could just push and straighten out again. And, when you tie a rope around a tree, you never want to, wrap it around the trunk, or it has to be loosely tied on the tree so that, there's a gap. It's never tight right against, you don't want to girdle it,
Yeah.
And then, but after about a year, most of those trees stayed upright. So you can actually straighten plants up, but you want to do it right away. You don't want to wait too long if you're going to try and do something like that.
Okay, so if you're just tuning in, good morning. I'm Sassy Susan, and you're listening to KSQM 91.5 and the Gardening with Ciscoe program with Ciscoe Morris. And remember, Gardening with Ciscoe is made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. And before we get to the stumper question, I wanted to remind any listeners out there that if you're planning on getting your COVID vaccine today, they have all the people that are in line that are eligible or that they have vaccines for, they've contacted. So please, if you're headed down there to get in line, please reschedule, and I will be giving you more information at the bottom of the hour at 9:30. So, Ciscoe, with that lead in, what is your stumper question? The woman that I talked to yesterday, she said, I loved the stumper question last week, fast bugs versus slow bugs. So obviously she was listening. So that is
so cool.
What is the stumper question of the day? And then I'll give the phone number that people can call with their answers.
Great. And I hope a lot of people will call in. This might seem a little odd, but okay, here's the question. Now, there are a lot of critters out there that eat slugs. So, snakes eat slugs, toads and frogs eat slugs, certain birds eat slugs. There's, even chickens will eat slugs, but they chop them into about 100,000 pieces before they eat them. But so the question is, do ducks eat slugs? And a lot of people wonder, do geese eat slugs? So you could give your opinion on that if you want. But the question is, do ducks eat slugs? And is it a good idea to hand feed a duck a large one? And you'll understand this question when I give the answer at the end.
Okay. So for all you listeners out there that that want to give us input, do ducks eat slugs, and is it a good idea to hand feed a duck a large one? We want to hear from you. Call 360-681-0000 or send an email to office@ksqmfm.com. And Linda is standing by to take your input and bring it in to me at whenever the calls come in. So this is an interesting one, Ciscoe, and it'll be interesting to see what the answer is. Okay, so let's get to the questions that we have. Oh, someone has a sick maple tree. Being from the Northeast, maple trees are so pretty. But last week, there's a sick. This is from Gretchen in West Seattle. Last year, it developed what looked like orange fungus on a large branch. We were told to cut the branch off and clean the saw well with alcohol, which we did do. We were also told to feed the tree in the spring and fall with Espoma organic tree tone, which we did. Boy, they really want to save this tree. Everything we've read says there's no hope for this tree. Please give us your opinion. You are the expert. Okay, the heat's on, Ciscoe. What advice do you have for Gretchen?
Well, so they have, it sounds to me like what they've got is coral spot fungus or nectaria. This is a fungus disease, and what you see when you look on a branch, you see these orange, they look like orange zips on the branch.
Okay, I think everyone out there knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Clearasil doesn't work on this, so... this is a pretty bad disease for a maple to get. Now, I was looking at the picture of their maple, and it's really hard for me to tell from looking at a picture of a maple with no leaves on it, but I'm willing to bet that this is one of our native vine maples. And vine maples, the problem is, if you see a vine maple in the woods, they're always in a little opening that gets some sun, but they're usually protected from any afternoon sun. And what we've been finding are vine maples that are planted in full sun get sunburned. When they do, that's the exact thing that this disease wants to find to get in. And so at a famous nursery, they had all vine maples out in their parking lot. They turn spectacular fall color every year. And I remember they called me up and said, you know, we've got this nectaria on there. Are we going to be able to save these? And here's the problem. It takes forever. You're going to get it on one branch, then you get it on another branch, and the only cure, there's no spray for this. The only cure is to cut off the branch that's got it to keep it from moving down into the tree and sporulating more. And so over time, they ended up cutting off practically every branch till the tree didn't look any good. So they kept them going about 5 years, and then they finally went, we got to do something different here. And that's the problem, you know. It's that those vine maples, if this is one, or it could be a Japanese maple that can't take full sun, either way, once they start having this problem, they're pretty susceptible, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to save it. Interestingly, I have an Albizia summer chocolate, which some people call mimosa summer chocolate tree, and they have these chocolate-colored leaves, magnificent. But I bought one $90 in a little pot. You know, brought it home, and I was all excited. I found nectaria on it the next summer, the next spring when it started to grow, and I thought, well, all the branches had it. So I thought, I'll cut it down below all the nectaria and see what happens. Well, unbelievably, it ended up turning into this incredible shrub that only grows about 8 feet tall. It's 10 times prettier than it would have been as a tall tree. And it's really dense and spectacular. Everybody that sees it just goes, wow, how did you get the idea to do that? Cut it down like that. It grows back every year. Some years I find some nectaria on the branches cut below. So you can get away with that with some trees.
Yeah.
But you might get away. You could try, if this gets really bad, you could try cutting it down to about 4 inches from the ground. Let it grow back, and you might have this really cool clumping vine maple that it's worth a try.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work, you know, then it's time for a new tree.
Well, you were just lucky. You dodged a bullet with that one, where how you saved that tree.
I did, and I take total credit for the genius idea of cutting it down, you know.
Mary had nothing to do with it, right? Mary had nothing to do with it, right?
No, that's right.
Okay, well, hopefully that gives Gretchen some helpful information. Before we get to the next question, as a reminder, if you're planning on going to get your vaccine, and here in Sequim, they have all the cars in line that they have the vaccine for, so you're going to have to reschedule, and I will be giving more details about that at 9:30. But right now, let's go to this question. This is kind of interesting. We've had our home for 20 years. This is from Michelle. And in the past year, the grass in our yard has started to smell strongly like weed. I guess when they're saying weed, I guess they're thinking marijuana. They didn't say.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah. Okay, so we've smelled all of the plants surrounding our yard, and it's not coming from any of them. It seems to definitely be coming from our grass. We notice it mostly right after we've cut it or when it's wet, which is often in Seattle. Do you know what could be causing this and how we could treat it? I must say this is a very unique question. So how can we help Michelle that her grass smells like marijuana?
As long as the neighbors aren't hippies, then I suspect that they have very poorly draining soil. And I have noticed this over the years in my gardening career that oftentimes when soil drains really bad, you start getting anaerobic bacteria that taking over the soil. And so it's not good for the grass. The grass has a lot of trouble growing in that. And the soil starts holding way too much water, which kills all the aerobic bacteria that lives on air in the soil. And this is special bacteria that can live in soil with very little air. And it tends to give off not very pleasant smell. And, I don't know. I've never noticed that it smelled like marijuana. Not that I would know what that smells like or anything. But the thing is, it's probably even going to become more noticeable, and probably is going to smell more like a wet dog or something.
And we both know what wet dog.
Soon.
We both know what wet dogs smell like, don't we? Since we both have dogs.
Oh boy, don't we? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So what can she do about this? Do you think that this is clay? There's a layer of clay. I'm learning so much from you, Ciscoe. Do you think that there's some clay that's preventing the drainage? And how can she, short of going around and sticking posts in it to promote drainage or putting in a French drain, what can she do?
Well, that's exactly it. If there was a way, if they're at the bottom of a hill, if they could put in a French drain, that might make a lot of difference. But she should do that test we talk about. Dig that test where you dig a 1 foot deep by 1 foot wide hole and fill it full of water. And if it doesn't drain, 3 or 4 inches in an hour, if it only drains like 1 inch or less in an hour, you've got really poorly drained soil, and you've got a problem. And she could try, if she doesn't want to spend a lot of money, then what you could try to do is aerate like 4 times a year, put compost down about a 1/2 inch deep, as long as, she's mowing the lawn when it gets 3 inches tall to 2 inches. If you've got a putting green out there, that's going to be a real problem. But so she could try that like 4 times a year and see if that might, eventually, if you do that over enough years, you're going to build up the soil level, and over time, maybe it'll give, at least enough elevation to the soil that maybe you won't keep getting that smell, because the grass will be growing up in there. But I'm afraid to really solve this problem, she probably needs to bring in manufactured topsoil and raise and put in a new lawn up at least 8 inches higher than where it is right now.
Wow.
And that's expensive and a lot of work. So she might just try the other thing and only go out to the backyard when the lawn is dry, so it doesn't smell like a big wet dog out there,
Well, I was just handed a piece of paper, and we have at least 2. Oh no, I think we have at least 3 people listening. Craig from Glendale called in and said ducks pretty much love slugs. And then Donna from Happy Valley, I assume here in Sequim, said the ducks that have come to our little pond, just love the slugs. But we have some pretty big ones, and I don't think they should be eaten in one bite. And then Karen called in or sent an email, and she said, I have Indian runner ducks. They do eat slugs and snails and manage to swallow some pretty big things. I think the bigger breed ducks wouldn't have any trouble eating a big slug. So the question of the day is, do ducks eat slugs, and is it a good idea to hand feed a duck a large one? So call 360-681-0000 or send an email to office@ksqmfm.com and tell us what you think. And I have so many papers here with so much information. If you're just tuning in, good morning. I'm Sassy Susan, and you're listening to KSQM 91.5, the Gardening with Ciscoe program with Ciscoe Morris. And remember, Gardening with Ciscoe is made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. All right, so let's see. We have This person, Teresa, used to live on the west side of Washington State, but she moved to Plain, Washington, near Leavenworth. I transported all of my plant containers to my new home. Can you imagine how much colder it is for my potted plants? I'm sure they're just shivering. Going from here to eastern Washington. I'm a little late on this, but how do I protect these plants? I placed burlap bags over the containers, but I'm worried about the roots and the foliage. Both? If so, how do I protect the roots? How can we help Teresa so her plants don't all die?
Well, I think this is going to be a baptism under fire, as they say. I think some of those plants probably aren't going to make that transition. But, the problem with throwing burlap over a plant is it blocks too much air. It's too dark in there. It might let some water through, but it's not going to let enough air and moisture and light. Light is the real critical one. So what you might want to do is get those frost protects that you can get from, like, Charlie's Greenhouse. You can go on, maybe you can find them somewhere else if you go on the web. But so Frost Protect, they're called, and these are these big bags made out of a fabric that lets air and water and light come through. And even though when I bought the first ones I bought, and I have a whole bunch of plants covered with those out in my back garden right now, and they raised the temperature only 8 degrees, though. That may or may not be enough out there in Plain, Washington, but they're better than burlap would be by far. And but when I bought them, it said only put them on the plant during the freeze and take them back off. But I don't do that. That's too much work. I leave them on all
You have
winter,
enough
and
to
I
do.
Take them off. Yeah, you're not kidding. The plants do. They look like a Seahawk that should have got pulled out of the game like 3 plays earlier. But they always seem to recover if they didn't freeze to death completely. I mean, I've lost some that I've covered. Also, putting them against the wall, and I know we've talked about that, Susan, that a wall, even on the coldest night, will absorb whatever, coldest day, will absorb whatever heat there is and give it back at night. So that might help too, but or stick them in an unheated garage at least for the coldest night.
Yeah.
And then, put them back out when conditions are a little more mild. But, and the other thing is, I think she mentioned she's digging a hole, putting the plants in a hole, the pots. Either you got to do that, you could bury the pots, or you could cover them with compost. But, yeah, if they're just sitting out, not only will if the roots freeze, it'll probably kill your plant in many cases, but also it can break beautiful ceramic pots.
Yeah.
They're pretty frost proof, but you get cold enough and that water gets inside that ceramic clay and they can just explode. I've had that happen even on this side of the mountains more times than I like to admit, But that's a bad feeling when you go out in the morning and there's your plant sitting there and it's dirt, and the ceramic pot that you paid $90 for is in about 20 pieces.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, she's it may help. She might want to do what I did and put all windows on the south side of her garage, put in skylights, and then also bring in grow lights. And I probably have 70 plants in my garage right now.
Well, so, that might work for maybe next season, but right now she needs something that'll help her to get through the winter. So but hopefully you've given her some suggestions. But for all those other people out there, that's something that they might need to think about.
Yeah. When you move, it's a whole different ballgame.
That's
over
right.
there.
There's a lot to think about other than just moving your furniture when you have a lot of plants. Well, right now it is 30 minutes past 9, and you are tuned to KSQM 91.5. And this is the, I've got all these papers here. You've got today, Ciscoe, Gardening with Ciscoe is sponsored by Sunny Farms, let me get this, Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. All right, so let's talk about, we have a plant of the week, I believe. I didn't get a chance to look it up, but what is the plant for the week today?
It's a wonderful, wonderful plant.
All of your plants are wonderful.
It's true. I have a favorite plant. I have about 8 billion favorite plants, actually. It's hard to tell which is the best. But these are Daphne odoras, which a lot of people know Daphne odora because they have probably the most wonderful fragrance of any plant I know, and they bloom in winter. Mine, the buds are just starting to open on mine, so they haven't quite opened up yet. But the hummingbirds really depend on them. And hummingbirds, as I mentioned before, have no sense of smell. But a lot of plants that have fragrant flowers are really high in nectar. And it's because they're trying to attract moths to pollinate them. But hummingbirds, they can find whatever flower has nectar in them. And I see them on my Daphne odoras all the time. So I actually have 3 pictures on my website, so you can go to that. And the marginata, Daphne odora marginata, is the most common one. These plants come from China. And so I've got a picture of that. And they've got a little bit of yellow around the outside of the leaf. Daphne odora Zuiko Nishiki has green leaves, but boy, it produces a ton of really fragrant flowers, and it's the toughest one. It's less likely to die than the other ones. And Daphne odora Miyajima has really deep yellow margins. It's really beautiful. Now, here's the bad news. Daphne odora is a wonderful plant. You should plant it where it gets morning sun and well-drained soil. It's a weird plant in that it can grow 20 years in your garden, or it can last 2 years, and it'll just die overnight. No warning, no sign anything's wrong. Boom, it's dead. And it always does it in my garden when I have a really important tour coming to see the garden that day. It's just better than a doornail, you know. And but don't let that depress you or something. They live on the side of cliffs in China where they don't get much water. And I think what happens here, with our winter rains and everything, even in well-drained soil, sooner or later the roots start to rot, and you don't really see it's happening until, boom, it's too late. But don't worry, just go buy another one, put it in a different place, and keep trying, because you know what's weird about the fragrance of this plant? If you go up and smell it, you hardly smell it. It's weird. But when you're walking by it, it's like the fragrance wafts out, grabs you by the nose, and twists you around back to the plant. Man, there's some magic in that fragrance.
Wow.
Oh, it's so wonderful.
So you said the key is to give it morning sun, and then there was one other thing that you mentioned.
It's the best draining soil you
best
can.
drain.
So,
okay. Good. Okay.
Yeah, don't plant that in clay. Don't even bother trying. It won't do anything. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So, yeah, for all those listeners out there, Ciscoe has been trying to make his plant of the week a plant that will help feed the hummingbirds through the winter so that they don't become reliant on hummingbird feeders, because some people like to travel. And if they become dependent on the feeders, then you're just leaving them out to dry and they don't have any source of nutrition. So this is awesome that you're concentrating on plants that help feed the hummingbirds without being reliant on humans. Okay, you ready for your next question? Oh,
am ready.
I hear the phone ringing, so maybe someone's going to give us some input about the stumper question. Do ducks eat slugs, and is it a good idea to hand feed a duck a large one? 360-681-0000 or office at ksqmfm.com. Okay, so this is something that I have seen in the local farmer market here in Sequim. I'm thinking of trying one of those indoor mushroom growing kits. It seems like you've done everything when it comes to gardening, so I'm assuming that you've tried this. Do you have any tips regarding how to do it successfully? This is from Tim. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this.
Well, I've done it twice.
Okay.
And I did it for the mushrooms, but also for fun, just to try it. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun. But it got me in a little trouble with my wife, Mary. So these things come as these big blocks of sawdust. They've got some grain in them and some water in them. And the first time I got one, it was to grow button mushrooms. And I think that was many years ago when the first kits came out. And I think they've refined them quite a bit since then.
Uh-huh.
So I had this it was the ugliest block you've ever seen in your life, right in the middle of our kitchen.
I can see why Mary wasn't happy with you.
Oh, yeah, she wasn't too happy with that. And then you've got to, now they tell you to put a plastic bag over them. You don't have to, but you got to mist them more often if you don't. You got to mist them 2 to 4 times a day, and it has to be, you want to put them on some kind of a platter or something because some of the water comes out of them. It could be pretty messy. It really is like having a creature from the Black Lagoon sitting in your kitchen, you know. So now, you know, you can stick some chopsticks or forks in there and put a plastic bag over it, cut some holes in the plastic bag. That helps keep the humidity. You still got to take it off and mist at least twice a day. If you don't cover it with a plastic bag, you might need to mist 6 to 8 times a day. And it has to be distilled water. It can't be chlorinated. Chlorine is a fungicide. It'll kill any fungus. Which
Good point.
Yeah. So for the first time we did this, it was so funny because you're supposed to get about a pound. We did button mushrooms the first time, and you're supposed to get a pound of mushrooms. Well, we got a pound of mushrooms with 1 mushroom. I don't know what went wrong, but instead of a whole bunch of mushrooms, we got this mega mushroom growing out of the top of this thing, and both Mary and I were afraid to eat it, you know. But you try it. No, you try it.
You eat it first. No, Mikey, you eat it.
But it actually did taste really good, and so usually you get 2 or 3 different harvests out of these things. There's some tricks you got to do. I can't remember what it all you had to do, but to get it to do the second one. But they work pretty good. And last time I did what are those Matashi? What are those ones called? I can't think of the name of them. They're really good though. But so the second time I did it,
you're talking about shiitake. Yeah.
Yeah, those worked really good. We got a ton of them, and I think I got it to work 3 times.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. But still, you got to put them in a spot that has good light.
Yeah.
So, and you don't want them to get too cold at night or anything. You don't want to go down below 55, you know, no matter what. So you know, unfortunately, at our house, the best place for that is in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And by the way, we got so many mushrooms the second time we did it that you're going to want to make sure you know how to dry them or freeze them. You could do either. Because you're going to get way more than you can eat. I wasn't really prepared to do that, so I was giving them to neighbors and friends. I was quite popular for a while with those guys. And they kind of give you tips to know right when to harvest them. You don't want to wait too long. You know, you want to harvest them. They don't all ripen up at the same time, thank goodness, but pretty close to that.
Yeah,
They're fun. It's worth trying.
Yeah, it's worth trying once. I know that I've seen a booth at our local farmer's market, and he had this block, and you could grow your own mushrooms. I've never tried it, so that's why I was interested to hear what you had to say. Well, right now it's 17 minutes to 10. You're tuned to KSQM 91.5, and I'm Sassy Susan, and you're listening to the Gardening with Ciscoe program. Remember, Gardening with Ciscoe is made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. And I need to back up from the mic a little bit. I'm getting so excited about listening to all this information. I need to set back a little bit more. Let's do one more question before we do the weather forecast. Will applying lime kill the moss that is taking over my lawn? And when is the best time to lime the lawn, and how much should I apply? This is from Jeff.
Okay, Jeff, it's probably a good idea to lime your lawn every 3 years or so. And if you do it every 3 years, you can put about 25 pounds per 1,000 square feet of lime out there. But it's not going to kill the moss. All you're doing is adding calcium, which a lot of our soils lack calcium. And I would use agricultural lime. Some people use dolomite lime. Dolomite lime has magnesium in it, and maybe once every, 6 years you could do that, but I wouldn't overdo that. You can get too much magnesium, so you got to be careful about that unless you do a soil test and find out you need that or something. But no, lime does not kill moss. What lime does for your lawn, and you should do it this time of year too, you never want to fertilize right after you lime or lime right after you fertilize, either way, because lime has a quality in it that turns the nitrogen into that's in the fertilizer into a gas, and it just goes away, and you don't get any fertilizer out of it. So doing it right now, because you're putting limestone down on your lawn, and the weather has to beat the tweedle out of it and break it down so it's available for the plant. So by adding lime, you're making the lawn grow better because it's got the calcium it needs, and it might change the pH too a little bit, which isn't a bad thing. But what lime does, it's opportunistic. It finds anywhere with bare ground and fills in. So if your lawn is thinning out like crazy, maybe you don't water it in the summer, maybe you never fertilize it much, anything like that, well, moss is going to take over no matter what you do. And you could kill the moss by using, moss killer that you buy, and it's iron sulfate that you put down. And be real careful if you use that. My friend's cat walked on her lawn after she put this stuff on her lawn, licked its paws later, and it killed her cat.
Ooh.
So I like to make sure people know that even something that seems totally innocent isn't. They also have soap moss killers that you could, they're hose end soap sprayers. That's probably a safer way to go. But so if you've got lime, you've got to get rid of that lime somehow, and then make the lawn healthy and full and thick, and then you won't get hardly any moss at all, except for in the shade, because grass hates shade, and it's going to thin out no matter what you do, and you're going to get moss.
Okay, so hopefully that'll help Jeff with the moss that he's having an issue with. Well, right now it's 13 minutes to 10. You're tuned to KSQM 91.5. And this is the Gardening with Ciscoe show, made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. Okay, well, we've had Conrad call in from Squim, and he said he has 28 ducks. They are Indian runners. They call them that because they move fast, and they definitely eat slugs. The only problems he has with ducks is that they can be taken by eagles, but he has a border collie that makes sure the eagles stay away. So that's
Wow, pretty cool.
yeah. So the question, the stumper question for those people that are listening, do ducks eat slugs, and is it a good idea to hand feed a duck a large one? Call 360-681-0000 or email office@ksqmfm.com. Oh my, all this information that we're learning today and sharing. Okay, here's one from Randy. Do I need to remove the needles that accumulate in my garden under a pine tree? The garden gets plenty of sunshine. I think the needles are making the soil too acidic because many of the plants in the garden are not doing very well. Okay, what advice do you have for Randy?
Well, my advice is that the plants under your pine tree probably aren't getting the water and nutrients they need because, big conifers, no matter what kind of conifer, they steal all the water and nutrients, and you have to water and fertilize way more under big trees like that. The pine needles and other leaves that fall off conifers, they are acid. They're usually about 3.1 or 3.2 on the pH scale, and 7 is neutral, but they don't make the soil acid unless you work them into the soil. If they just lay on the soil surface, the natural processes that break them down neutralize them and take away the acid effect. So if they're just on the surface, they actually make a really nice mulch. They'll keep weeds from growing. They'll add nutrition, improve the soil. Don't work them into the ground, whatever you do. So if you're planting a new plant, you got to get them out of the way. Don't, so that they don't get worked in. And then you can put them back. So, yeah, it's not the needles. You don't have to worry about those. I think it's the water nutrition.
Ah, okay. Okay, so hopefully that helped Randy. I hadn't thought about that the plants under the needles aren't getting enough water. That's why that makes perfect sense. You are so smart, Ciscoe.
Tell my wife that, will you?
Okay, well, last week, this next question, last week we had 2 questions about people that had very sentimental attachment to some plants that they wanted to be able to save them because, plants, we connect memories with plants if they've been in the yard of a relative. So this is from Rachel, and she says that there's an especially attractive, quite large rhododendron in my mom's garden that I've never been able to find for sale at a nursery. Now, my mom is planning to sell the house and move in the next couple of years, so that's a good thing. She has some time. Is there any way to take cuttings or somehow propagate the rhodie so I can keep a living memory of my mom's plant? Now, last week, these people, their uncle was going to be putting the house on the market in a couple of weeks. And so there was a kind of a time crunch. But Rachel has a couple of years. So what kind of advice can you give Rachel, so that she can keep her mom's plant with her?
It's funny because some rhododendrons are really easy to take cuttings and propagate. Others, like King George odora, a really fragrant one I have in my garden, are practically impossible to propagate from cuttings. So now they do tissue culture, which is a whole different way they do it. So it's hard to say whether she could take a cutting and get it to root. It might be worth a try, but she's going to have to go on the web and find out how to make a little propagation chamber, because just putting it in water almost never works with the rhododendron. Mm-hmm. So she can try that if she wants. But if that rhodie has branches that go all the way down to the ground, she can layer that. So what you can do is take one of those lower branches and bury the center of the lower branch underground, just, a couple inches underground, making sure the end of the branch comes back up out of the soil. And, pull all the leaves off the part that you're putting under the ground. And sometimes people cut in a little bit at a node with a knife or something, not very far, but that promotes rooting. And then you put a big stone on that so that the wind doesn't blow it out of the ground or anything. And usually in about a year, it'll root. And so you can go out in spring, and you can pull on the end of the branch, and if you feel a lot of resistance, then hey, it's rooted down there. You cut it off the mama plant, very carefully dig it out, and replant it, so that roots start right at just under the soil level, and you got yourself the same roadie your mom's got. And it works with practically any plant I know. The problem is going to be if none of the branches, if the branches are up high, if the lower branches are up high, then you're not going to be able to do that. Then I have one more suggestion for this person, and that is, Rachel, what you could do is go to the rhododendron species garden in Federal Way and bring them a branch with a flower, and tell them, I love this. This has been in my mom's garden. Do you know what it is? Because they know. And a lot of times, they've got it in their garden. They'll do a cutting for you. Unfortunately, you'll have to pretend it's from your mom's garden. But you'll have the same plant, so at least you'll have a beautiful rhododendron in your garden, and you can think of your mom when you look at it.
Those are both really good ideas. I've heard of if a branch is close enough to the ground to make a little, put it in the ground, and fortunately she has a couple of years. This isn't something that they have to do. Her mom isn't going to sell the house in 2 months. So it's good.
And if she waits 2 years, she does it right away. I do it soon. If she waits, the longer she waits, the more roots there'll be. So she can go over there and cut that off the day before her mom moves, and she'll have a really great start.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we're able to help Rachel. I like happy endings. It's 3 minutes to 10. You're tuned to KSQM 91.5. This is the Gardening with Ciscoe show, and Gardening with Ciscoe is made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. Well, let's do another question before we do the mandatory top of the hour station ID. Justin in Port Angeles wants to know, can anything be done for super saturated lawn areas?
Yeah, that could be a really big problem, and very similar to that first question we had today, I think, or second question, and that is, so if you are at the bottom of a hill and all the water's running down from all your neighbor's house down the hill, a French drain is the way to go. So you just dig a big thing and make sure that you put in some drainage pipe and cover it with gravel, and then it's always, you got to make sure that it's going down so it sends the water, so it intercepts, you're intercepting the water and keeping it off. But if you don't have that situation and you've got saturated lawn, either you've got to decide, do I really want a lawn? Because there's a lot of plants that can live in clay, and, you could kind of do some really pretty gardens with Road Jersey and red maples like clay and sweet gums, and so there's red twig dogwoods. There's a lot of plants. So, and you could just make the lawn in the areas that are drier. So that's one way you could go if you have any lawn at all. Otherwise, as we mentioned earlier, you got to bring in topsoil and raise that soil level And really, the recommended amount, you should raise it 12 inches. So that can be expensive. But once you do it, you'll have a great lawn for years. So.
But and then when you raise the lawn 12 inches, then you have to look at the sidewalk because then your sidewalk is going to be 12 inches below your grass. So
and you either got to put in a brick wall or something, or I used to do a lot of consulting when I had people build berms between the sidewalk and the lawn. And then we'd plant really pretty things all along the sidewalk and everything. And that way you didn't even notice that you had raised the lawn.
Right.
And so it's either way, it's going to be a lot of work. But it does work and can be beautiful.
Well, hopefully that gives Justin some ideas of what he might be able to do.
Save your money, Justin.
Well, let's do a top of the hour to comply with FCC rules, and then we'll be right back.
You're tuned to KSQM 91.5 SQM.
Okay, it is straight up 10 o'clock, and we have a couple of more questions. I think we're going to be able to get to all the questions. I like it when we can address, I like it when we can get to all of them, because if people have taken the time to send in a question, I hate, sometimes we've had to roll them over to the next week, but I think we can do them all this week. Okay, so this is from Lily. She said, after you featured Camellia Yuletide as one of your plants of the week, I found a couple of nice ones at my local nursery. Now I have a quick question about planting these beauties. Can I plant it now, or should I leave it in its nursery pot until spring? I know that it is an acid-loving plant, so I will amend the garden soil with mulch and peat moss if it goes in the ground now. Now, if you recommend that I wait, should I dig a hole in the ground to set the pot in and protect the roots for now? Okay, Lily found one of your plants, and she really loves them. So, what guidance can you give Lily?
So, first of all, Lily, I do want to remind you that we don't recommend adding amendments into the planting hole anymore. In the old days, we always told people, okay, when you're planting your Camellia Yuletide, add a bunch of peat moss or compost in the planting process. But now we've learned that doesn't really work. The plants love being in that compost and everything, the amended soil, but they don't want to go out into the native soil of your garden, and they end up just twirling around in the hole, and it can cause more trouble than good. So just plant it in the soil you've got. Almost anywhere on this side of the mountains in Washington, the soil is about 5.6 pH, which is plenty good for camellias. They'll be delighted. And then you could fertilize your camellias with organic rhododendron food, which will just add a little more acidity. It'll be great. Here's the thing, though. So these Yuletide camellias, they're hardy once established, but if they get walloped with a freeze right after you plant them, they can really get hammered. It happened to me. I planted one, then we got a hard freeze, and it really damaged it. It recovered, but it took a couple of years before it started blooming good and doing it. By the way, don't forget those Yuletide camellias. They're Ciscoe camellias with the smaller leaves. They like sun. You don't want to plant these in deep shade at all. If they get morning sun, even a little afternoon sun, they'll bloom way better. So what I recommend, because of Sassy, your weather report was really good to hear, because I'm going to recommend that Lily waits until we get over the next cold snap. And once that's gone, maybe, listen to KSQM so that you can make sure when the next freeze and snow is coming. So, and then I would go ahead and plant them once you think we're past the cold snaps. You know, I mean, you still could get them, and you might have to cover it or do something to protect it. But I would just, you know, hang on to it. I don't think you even have to protect the roots until that cold snap. Then just put it in the unheated garage and bring it back out as soon as the cold snap is done. And if we've got mild weather for a while, go ahead and plant them.
Yeah, I just pulled up the weather, and that cold weather is supposed to be on Thursday. Now, it doesn't say if Lily lives here in Sequim or if she lives in Seattle, but still, she needs to keep an eye on the weather as far as what's going to be happening. Yeah. Okay, so she found a couple of your plants. That's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so Charles says, I would like to plant some ivy or daisies or some type of ground cover to help keep the ground stable on a rather large hillside in Port Angeles. What do you recommend? I'm just trying to plan now and plant later. That is a good philosophy to follow. You got to plan and then you plant. Good idea. Okay, what ideas do you have for Charles?
It really is. Okay, Charles, first thing I'm going to say is that, you know, even when you walk around on a hillside planting things to hold it together, it disrupts the hillside, especially if you got to remove some plants that are growing there and things to put in the ones you want. So you might want to have like a soil engineer, if the hillside's really steep or anything. Wouldn't be a bad idea to have a soil engineer come out and just take a look to advise you, not so much on the plants, although they might, but more on just, you know, how safe is that hill, is plants enough, whatever. But having said that, if it's at all shady, then salal works great to hold a bank. It's a native plant that Washington, berries that birds die for. I eat them when I'm out gardening sometimes when they're perfectly ripe. They're pretty flavorful. And also Oregon grape. And there's a whole lot of different varieties of Oregon grape. There's nervosa, which stays low to the ground. There's even lower ones. There's our aquifolium, which is our regular Oregon grape. Those are often recommended by the state, but that's only in shade. So if you're in a sunny spot, then one thing that I used really successfully at Seattle U was Rosa rugosa alba, and alba means white. And so this is a rose from China. It's a shrub rose, and it's got nasty prickers. I'll warn you about that. And by the way, deer do devour these, so this may or may not work out there. I forgot about that, but. So you're going to just have to put an electric fence up. But it spreads from the rose hips. It's beautiful. It's so fragrant. You can't believe it. So that would be a good choice. If you're in deer country, you could try grasses. There's a lot of grasses that send out roots, like miscanthus is Chinese maiden grass, but there's a lot of other ones. They're tough as nails, so they'd cover that. And one other suggestion I have, but you're going to have to check with your nursery and make sure that they're hardy where you live. But cistus is called rock rose, and cistus purpurea means purple, and it has purple flowers practically all summer. We use this, and I don't think deer would eat this because I'm not sure, but I think it would be too strong flavored. You might check into that too. But we planted that on a lot of banks at Seattle U, and it was more to give us weed control because they grow to about 4 feet tall and about 3 or 4 feet wide, and they all grew together, bloomed with spectacular purple blossoms all summer long, were evergreen, and the actual foliage has a wonderful fragrance. They use it in perfumes and things like in France. So it's a pretty cool plant, but you're going to probably want to do more research still to see what'll work for you. But
Well, Charles
Yeah.
Charles has the good idea. He's trying to plan now and plant later. So I think you've given him some pretty good ideas of what he can do. Right now it is 8 minutes past 10. You're tuned to KSQM 91.5. And let's see if we can knock out these 2 more questions before we conclude our session today. I have a large Japanese maple that's probably 3 feet high and 5 to 6 feet across at the branches. I need to move it because it does not get enough light and the backside is bare because of the lack of sun. I read online that it's best to move these in the spring, and I'm wondering if it's too late to move them this year. And also, what would you suggest for soil and transfer process? This is from Steve.
Steve, your timing is perfect. Right now you want to do it.
Yeah.
And especially we've got this little dry period right now, and I wouldn't worry about the cold snap coming. That's not going to hurt your Japanese maple. You're just going to want to mulch around it when you plant it. But but I got to tell you, that's a pretty big lace leaf Japanese maple. That baby is going to be heavy. So you got to go to the base and measure about the diameter of the trunk right where it comes out of the ground. And you have to have 10 inches of root ball for every inch of diameter of the trunk. So if you've got a 6-inch root ball, a 6-inch trunk, you're going to have a 60-inch root ball. That's going to be so heavy. So my recommendation is go to the store or go to the market there in Sequim, wherever you live, and buy a bunch of Brussels sprouts because you're going to want to serve something really good for these guys that you're inviting over to help with this. And make sure that you've got a very full cooler of beer, too. But no beer until the job is done. So dig in, make sure that any branch, any root that you damage, you cut back nice. Dig it out till you get it all dug out, which is going to be quite a job. And then what you do is you put in a big piece of plywood. You dig one side of the hole so that it's way low, so that and you put the plywood in there, and you're going to put a giant blanket around the root ball and have your friends on each side holding the blanket. You're going to pull it up the plywood. And then, however, I don't know how far you're going to move it or what you're going to do. You can actually move it by putting, pipes under the plywood and keep moving them out and roll it along. Or maybe you can get it on something that you can use to roll it. And then when you plant it, don't add anything to the soil or anything. Make sure it's a spot with well-drained soil, and don't take it from a shady spot and stick it in baking sun or something.
Yeah.
It'll fry it, So it's got to be similar conditions that you took it out from with well-drained soil. And I have moved 100-year-old Japanese maples at Seattle U, so you can do it.
It is possible, but eat lots of Brussels sprouts and have beer for the people that help you. So you use the diameter of the trunk for each inch of diameter. How much for the whole?
Each inch of diameter is 10 inches.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so you could, boy, those root balls can be heavy. If you had to, you could actually wash the soil off the roots and move it. But I prefer not to do that if I had a choice.
Okay, this last question that we're going to do is from Kathleen. And I want to say I kept the best for last because as a nurse, I wanted to thank her. She's working at the vaccination clinic today. And her question, I guess she sent it, I don't remember seeing this question. She says, good morning. I think my question got lost, so we'll ask it again. That's fine because I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to pick Ciscoe's brain. I will be out volunteering at the vaccination clinic today, so I will look for the answer on YouTube. Her question is, I would like to know if I can grow roses in pots in Sequim. She lives in the Dungeness area, and would she need to bring them in for the winter? This is from Kathleen.
Kathleen, as long as you have a pot that's at least as big as a whiskey barrel, then, a half whiskey barrel they sell.
Uh-huh.
If they're at least that big, and it could be any kind of pot you want. It doesn't have to be a whiskey barrel, but it's got to be that big. If it's that large, and make sure you buy frost-proof ones, then you don't have to move those roses in. You can leave them out year-round in that pot, and even in the coldest weather. Now, if we were going to get the worst Arctic freeze ever, and it's going to get down into the single digits, which I've seen happen even in Seattle,
Yep.
then I would wrap a blanket or something around the pot just to be safe and over the top of it. But that's about the only problem. There is one little addition to this, I have to say, and that is you don't want to use a tree rose in there. You know how what they do is they take one rose and they make it a single stem straight up and take off all the branches, and then they graft on another kind of rose on the top of that. Those die in real cold weather, so you don't want to go with one of those. But just about any other kind of rose, as long as it's hardy in your conditions, you can grow it in a pot, and they do terrific in pots. They're beautiful.
So the reason being is there's enough dirt in a pot the size of a barrel to protect the roots of the rose. Is that why is that what you're using that size for?
Yeah. Yeah, I almost never, ever lose it. I have a lot of plants that stay out in pots here, and I almost never, as long as they're hardy, I almost never lose them if they're in that size pot. Now, you get the smaller pots, it starts to get risky because that freeze can get in there too far, too quick. So
Okay.
that's the only thing.
Well, it is 15 minutes past 10, and this has been a very informative Gardening with Ciscoe session, and we have a sponsor for the Gardening with Ciscoe. This is made possible through the support of Sunny Farms Farm Store and Nursery, the biggest little nursery in town. So the Stumper Question. Okay, Ciscoe. We have had comments, we've had people call in, send emails about your question about slugs and ducks. Okay, do ducks eat slugs? And is it a good idea to hand feed a duck? You're laughing. So we are all going to go, oh no, I can't believe that is the answer.
Okay. By the way, geese don't eat slugs, but ducks do. And they devour them, which I noticed everybody that had ducks knew that they eat slugs and called in. But I was at a friend's house.
Geese don't eat slugs? That surprises me.
No.
Okay.
I know, me too, but geese don't seem to like them.
Okay, so what is, drum roll please.
All right, so the drum roll is, yes, ducks eat slugs, but when it comes to hand feeding them, I have to tell a real fast story. I was down in Oregon where my friend raises ducks, and I asked her, did the ducks really eat slugs? She goes, oh, yeah, you won't find a slug in this garden. She said they devour them. So I went for a walk, and I found this huge slug. So I brought it back, and I said, hey, can I feed this slug to your duck? She said, well, I've never hand-fed one, but I guess you could. Well, it rolled up into the tightest ball you've ever seen, and I handed it out to the biggest duck. And the duck came over there, was all excited. It wanted to eat that slug. Ate it right out of my hand, but it was in such a tight ball, the duck started to choke to death. It was out there going, quack, 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 quack. I thought I was going to have to give a Heimlich maneuver to a duck. And finally choked it down. So, yes, they do eat ducks, but don't hand feed them one, whatever you do.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, Ciscoe, I don't know where you get these, but these are a highlight of the show. So I have to say goodbye. It is 18 minutes past 10 right now, and we will talk to you next Saturday. How's that, Ciscoe?
That sounds terrific. I
Okay,
can't
okay.
wait.
And so I have a sending song. This person that I met yesterday while I was on my walk, she requested a song. So that is going to be your sending song today.
Oh, cool.
That is Bing Crosby, You Are My Sunshine. How's that, Cisco?
Hey, perfect.
Okay, talk to you next Saturday, Cisco. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.